Hey everybody, DJ here, and welcome to part 2 of the Blender Beginners course. We are going to be talking about general navigation in the program. Just be ready for learning some hotkeys and how to move around inside of the interface. If you haven't yet, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. And if you have any questions or you just want to share your information or your knowledge or whatever you want to do on our Discord channel, you can see the link below in the video description. And there is also a Patreon if you are inclined to give a little bit to cover the costs of making these videos. So let's jump into Blender, and we're just going to continue where we left off last time. I just opened up a brand new file, and it's going to be the default cube. We're just going to click off to the side over here, and this is going to be where we're going to start from. And this is basically going to cover a lot of the general navigation controls. I'm going to show you how to change a couple things early on instead of later on in other tutorials that normally other people would show you some of these navigation changes. Just because I know that a lot of you might be people coming from other programs like Cinema 4D or Maya or 3ds Max or SolidWorks or whatever, and you'll want to know some very specific navigation controls. So first off, if you're new to the channel, down here on the bottom left, you'll see a keyboard, and there are some commands there. And I'm also going to turn on the screencast keys, which you'll see start right down here in the bottom left, and they'll kind of show you what I'm pressing. Now, sometimes it doesn't work perfectly, so if that kind of disappears, we do have the other one down there on the bottom left that will help out just in case that happens. So first off, the thing that you need to really know to start off with is that you kind of need to have a three-button mouse. If you're using a laptop, I would recommend that you get a mouse with three-button command. But if you don't have one, you can go over to the preferences, and under the input right here, you can see it says emulate three-button mouse. So you'll select that, and you can see right here if you hover over it, it says emulate middle mouse with alt left mouse. So if you don't have a three button, you can do that. Um, but I do recommend that you get the three-button mouse because it really does make things a lot easier, and I'll kind of show you that as we go along here. And we'll go ahead and go out of the preferences there. And so middle mouse will rotate around your scene. You can hold shift to pan across your scene with the middle mouse click. And those are really the two basic ways that you're going to be moving around your scene. And you'll notice that as I'm sort of like moving around here, and I'm holding shift and then middle mouse clicking, that I'm kind of moving all over the scene, and the point of interest, the center point, is changing along with it. And that's because you kind of have to consider that where we start off at 0 here, so here's the y coordinate and the x coordinate here. And if we can't really see it right now, but if you look over here in the gizmo, you can see that there's a z here. So there is a z orientation that goes like this. And basically the center point starts right in the center, but as we shift and move, the center point is also shifting and moving, making it difficult. If you get, way over here or something like that, it makes it difficult to get back to where you were over there. You have to kind of move around your scene like this, and it can be a little bit cumbersome. So there is a way that you can resolve this issue by, I'll show you two methods. So Shift C will center the scene where it's kind of like the center of everything that's going on here. So all of your objects, it's centered right in the middle here. The other thing that you can do is if you have a numpad, you can hit full stop or period on the numpad, and it will zoom in on the object, and then you can zoom out with the middle mouse wheel to go in and out like this, and you can move around your scene that way and center to an object. Now, if you don't have a number pad, that's okay because you can go up to Edit, Preferences, and then right here in Input, you can see it says Emulate Numpad. So that'll basically make it to where the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0 on the top of the keypad will become the numpad. Now, if you have a laptop, I do recommend that you, if you don't have a numpad, you can get a like a little peripheral, an add-on or whatever you want to call it. There's like a little numpad device that you can buy that will like plug into your USB, and I do recommend that you get that because you really want to use that in this program. I think it's a lot easier to move around your scene when you have that numpad. full stop there. We can zoom in on that object and we can kind of move around. Now, one thing that I think is very helpful is knowing the next thing that I'm going to show you, which is how to change the navigation on what you're sort of like centered on. So if we go up to Edit Preferences and we go to Navigation, there's other ways of doing the orbit method. And the first thing here, you can see orbit sensitivity, so you can change the sensitivity of moving around. But really what I want to show you is some of this stuff here. Now, the auto settings are really what we're going to be looking at. So the first one here, it says orbit around selection. And then this one right here says depth, and those are unchecked. But auto right here, it says check to perspective. So just kind of watch. You can leave this open for now, but I want you to just kind of watch what I'm going to do. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm just kind of moving around the scene. And what you're seeing here, you can see that there's vanishing points or vanishing distance here. You can see that things get smaller. So we do have a sense of perspective in the scene. Now, if I were to hit 1 on my numpad, it will go to a front view, and there's no longer any perspective. Okay? And what that means is that we are now in an orthographic view. And for making things in CGI, you want to look at things in orthographic because you can check proportions and all sorts of really helpful things. And you can see here there's a blue line for the z-axis, and then there's the x going across this way for the x-axis. And if you look right up here on the left, you can see it says front orthographic. Now, to show you the difference between orthographic and perspective, we can actually hit 5 on the numpad. And now I'm in the front view, but you can see the perspective lines here on the bottom grid and on the sides. And if I hit 5 again, it will go to orthographic. So the auto orthographic or the auto perspective that you have checked off in your navigation controls, when I hit 3, 1 goes to the front, 3 goes to the side, 7 goes to the top. And then if I hold Control and I press those same ones, if I hit Control 7, I'll go to the bottom view. And if I hit Control 1, I'll go to the back view instead of the front. And then if I hit Control 3, I'll go to the left side instead of the right side. So there's right side, holding Control, hit 3 again, and now I'm on the left side. So every time we do that to set these different perspectives or these different camera angles for our view here inside the viewport, we're changing the perspective as we do it. And then 5 can go to perspective or to orthographic. And you can see again on the top left, it's changing perspective and orthographic. So there we go. So if I go to Edit Preferences, and you should probably still have it open while you were watching that, and I'm just going to change this. I'm going to change the depth here. And this is really helpful for if you're sculpting. So if you're sculpting, the auto depth allows it to be where the mouse will change the pan, rotate, or zoom functionality. So it will change where things are moving around in the scene. So then the orbit around selection here, it will basically use whatever you have selected as the thing that's orbiting around. So let's just click that on for now. And I'm going to pan around and move over here, and then I'm going to rotate. But you can see that the point of rotation, even though that's not in the center, it's rotating around that point right here. And if I click on this one, you can see that the point that it's rotating is a different object. And if I click this light here and I pan the scene, let's say over here, and I start rotating, it's actually using this point right here to rotate that center of rotation. Okay. And it can be a little disorienting because you might be used to it rotating around wherever it is that you have panned to, holding shift and moving around. But really, this helps when you are, let's say, editing an object in the mesh editor or you're sculpting or something like that. This helps because if you have a particular point on a mesh that you're messing with, you're moving it around, or you're, adjusting your object, you can use that particular point to rotate around so that instead of it being some arbitrary location that you've panned to on accident, it actually rotates around that particular object. Now, the other thing that's on here is the auto depth. And the auto depth basically will change the location of a point based on the depth that something has been selected. So right here, I have the cursor and I don't have anything selected right now. So you can see there's nothing selected. All right. But if I take the cursor and I move, I hold middle mouse click and I start to rotate, it's actually rotating around the depth that the cursor is kind of attaching onto a surface. So if I pan over here and I'm wanting to rotate around that object, you can see that it's rotating around this point that I started from instead of an arbitrary location or even something that I'm not selected on. And then when I select on something, now I'm rotating around that point that's selected, etc. So having kind of like an understanding of how that works, and I'm showing you the edit mode here. We haven't really talked about it, but tab goes in and out of edit mode for an object if you have it selected. When you're working on either advanced or beginner projects and you're finding it very difficult to navigate around your scene in the viewport, I strongly recommend that you try to play with some of these to see if it will help you out, especially if you're using a tablet for sculpting or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these off right now because we're not really going to need that. And sometimes it can get a little tricky when you're trying to just do some regular stuff. So I'm going to click those off and it automatically saves. If you go down here, you can click save preferences, but I have auto save preferences enabled, so we don't really need to do that. Now, one thing I will tell you is that once you've made some of those changes, the preferences will save. So the next time you open up a program or a project inside this program, those will be saved. So if you're, starting from scratch and you're seeing that your navigation is all over the map, you might want to go back up to your preferences and adjust those and move it back to set it back to the defaults. So I want to just really quick just run through some of those camera angles one more time. So full stop or period on the numpad will zoom in on an object or center it. 1 will go to a front view, 7 will go to the top, 3 will go to the right, and then holding control will go to the opposites of those. So control 1 will go to the back, control 7 will go to the bottom, control 3 will go to the left side. And you'll know where you are because of this up here on the left. Over here, you're going to see a gizmo. Now, I recommend that you do things this way, but a lot of people are used to a gizmo, especially if you work in gaming programs or something like that. A lot of times the gizmo is a little bit easier to use. So if you click and drag on the gizmo, it actually will work just the same as if you use the middle mouse click. Also, if you want to look at a particular view, you simply have to click on a particular orientation here. So you can see right here if you hover over it, use a preset view, click. So boom, right there, I'm on the front. Click this one here, boom, I'm on the right. This one, I'm on the top. And you can click on these to go to the different views if that's the kind of thing you want to do. Now, the other thing is I'm using the middle mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Well, you can also click on this right here, click and drag up and down, and you can zoom in on your object. This hand right here will basically pan your scene. And the camera, which we're going to talk about that in a minute, will go to your camera view. And then this right here will switch between perspective and orthographic projection. So now we are in perspective here, and now we're in orthographic. Now in our scene, we have a couple objects here, and we can simply click on these by left-clicking the objects. And if you ever want to center on those, you just have to give it a think about what you might want to do. So if we want to center our view on this particular object here, we click on it, and then we hit full stop, and that will center to that object. And the same thing like this right here for this light. If you click on it and you hit full stop, you will then center to that object as well and move around it. Each of the objects in your scene will have a different set of parameters, and we're not really going to get into that in this particular video, but it's important to know that every time you click on something, if you look at this panel over here on the right, if I'm selected on the cube, which you can also see up here in the tree, there's a set of parameters here, and then if I click on this little thing right here that's called light, the parameters all change. And the same thing over here with the camera. If I click on the camera, you can see that this icon right here changed because each object has a different set of properties that you might want to adjust or do different things to, and it's important to know what you're selected on. One thing that you'll notice is that on the left and on the right, we do have some little panels that can open, and we're going to use N to basically pull up the panel on the right. So N will move it or bring it out or have it slide back, and you can click and drag this little arrow right here and push it right back where it was, and that will open up those different parameters there. Over here on the left, you have some tools. So if we hit T, we can actually bring out and hide those tools. And you can see up here, there is a tweak tool a select box if we click and hold down on the mouse, on the left mouse button. You can see there's a tweak, a select box, a select circle, and a select lasso. Just make sure that this is on select box, and you can basically left click and drag to select objects. And if you select everything and you hit full stop, it will basically create a point at which everything is centered in the view. So we're kind of centered somewhere in this general area here. If you don't want to have anything selected, you can simply hit Alt A and it will deselect everything. And then hitting A will select everything in the scene. So A for everything to select all, and then Alt A will deselect everything. Now, as far as the camera view is concerned, we're not really going to talk too much about the camera, but I am going to tell you how you can kind of navigate around with the camera selection. So if we press 0 on the numpad, it's going to put us in the camera view. And when we're in the camera view, if we try and move, so I'm going to hold middle mouse and move, you can see that I moved out of the camera view. And if I hit 0 again, I'm back in the camera. Now, there's a really fun thing that you can do where if you go over here, you slide this open, you can go to view, and then you can go to camera view, select that, hit N to hide all this stuff here, and you can see that there's this red outline. And from here, we can actually do all of the same commands for our navigation, but we're moving the camera. Now, this can be a little bit disorienting, but the main thing that I would recommend that you do and you play around with is that you select the box, you hit full stop, and then you kind of zoom out and hold the mouse wheel to move around your scene and pan around and just get used to that sort of navigation controls and sort of set up a scene where you have some sort of composition. It doesn't have to be anything really neat because we're not doing anything except for having this. But let's say you have it set up where on the left side you have the cube and then on the right it's not there. Now, what's really important here is that if you do anything else, if you, I'm going to hit Alt A here to deselect everything. If you want to keep this here and you don't want to actually move the camera anymore, you'll have to hit N to open up your panel over here for all these tools here. You'll want to go to view and then deselect this lock, view lock under view, camera to view, and then hit N again to move that back over. And now you have your camera set for that composition. There are two other ways that you can actually navigate around your scene, and there are some of the ways that people find more natural because they're used to other sorts of gaming engines or something like that. And it's called the walk and fly navigation. So if you go up to view here and you go down to navigation and you go down to the bottom, you'll see that there's fly navigation and walk navigation. So let's just first start with the walk navigation. So I'm just going to click on that. And you'll see that my cursor has kind of disappeared, or at least the one that was there, and there's just a little black crosshair right in the middle. Hopefully you can see that. Now, this basically works like a first person shooter or like a video game where your mouse is going to determine where your view is. And if you press W, you can walk forwards, A will sort of strafe to the left, and D will strafe to the right, and S will move backwards. And what's really cool is if you have some sort of cityscape or something like that, and you want to go to a point of interest way off in the distance, let's say we want to just zoom up on this cube here, if we hit spacebar, we can actually zoom right to that point and then move around the scene and take a look at what's going on. Now there is a way to turn on gravity. If you hit tab, I will actually move to where I am on top of the cube here. So if I go up here and I were to go right on top of the cube here and hit tab, I'm now standing right on this box and I'm just kind of moving. And if I were to fall off here, then it would put me off into the middle of nowhere there. And that's a really cool feature here. Now to get out of this view, all we have to do is hit right click, and then we're back to where we were originally before we ended up in the fly and walk. I forgot to mention, and I'll just show you really quick, I'm going to go back into the navigation walk, and just really quick, basically if you wanted to go up and down, Q goes down, E goes up. So WASD, and then you have the Q and E, and then the space bar to zoom to certain points. If you wanted to kind of keep this view, all you'd have to do is hit the left mouse button, and then you're now in that new view, and it's kind of not great right there. But you could set your view like that, and then right click just kind of goes back out to where we were before. So next thing that we're going to do is fly mode, which I'm actually not as much of a fan of, but you know, it is. It is something that people can use for setting things like certain types of camera animations and things like that. But basically, you have this different sort of situation where I'm moving the mouse up and down, left and right, and then you can move your view this way. And if you hold the different ways of moving, so WASD, the different keys, it will actually change the sort of like trajectory or momentum or whatever you want to call it, um, to different sort of like speeds. So you kind of have to be a little bit careful with how you're doing this, because you can really easily just start flying all over the place. But it's definitely worth just playing around with and seeing how much you kind of like these different views to sort of use these in different ways of how you're creating a scene or maybe previewing an animation for a camera or something like that. It really sort of helps out to flesh out and figure out what you're trying to do inside your scene by doing these different orientations with the navigation inside of your viewport. And these are really things that a lot of people don't cover in regular sort of traditional Blender tutorials that I've seen. They really don't cover these extra views. So I really wanted to make sure that I took a moment to show that to you. I'm just going to right click here. It's going to set us right back where we were before. So that's pretty much going to be it for this tutorial. Hopefully you guys learned how to navigate around your scene in a whole bunch of different ways. And for those of you who are veterans of Blender, hopefully you learned a couple new things about how to actually move around in your scene and utilize it to its fullest extent. Make sure you subscribe so that you can get all the new videos as they come out, and make sure you hit the bell icon in order to get notifications once they're released. And I will see you guys next time on DJ Tutorials.